بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الآفة الثانية فضول الكلام. So the second defect is فضول الكلام, which you could say is excessive speech. Excessive in terms of quantity and excessive in terms of content. Maybe small in quantity, but the actual content may not necessarily be essential. So he says, وهو يتناول الخوض فيما لا يعني وزيادة فيما يعني على قدر الحاجة. So the definition here Imam Ghazali gives, if we've got to look at these things as kind of like prescriptions or like a diagnosis. Do I have a bit of this in me? To what extent? How can I apply it to myself? And when we're reading these kind of texts, this is the way we should kind of take from it. And it's to kind of partake in khawd, once again, this plunging, this getting involved, فيما لا يعني, that which has no meaning. So there's an overlap in some of these things. وزيادة فيما يعني على قدر الحاجة, and more than what's necessary in that which is of meaning to you. And if you look at all of these defects, typically they're indicative of some kind of imbalance, some form of imbalance. The balance being the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the source of that health, of health, and any move away from that is an imbalance. So it's ziyada, it's too much. The prophetic way is not too little, not too much. It's the right thing at the right time, the right way. He says, قال عطاء, early Salaf, إن من كان قبلكم يكرهون فضول الكلام. Indeed, those that came before you, your predecessors in the deen, they used to dislike excessive speech. ويعدون الفضول ما عدا كتاب الله تعالى وسنة رسوله. And they would consider excessive speech anything which goes outside of the book of Allah and the words of the Prophet ﷺ. That was the hal of the Salaf. Just so we get some kind of, okay, so where am I at on that balance? That's where they were at. They would consider it excessive. أو أمرا أو نهيا, or some kind of command to good, or command, negation. أمرا أو نهيا, something which can be functional, but it also means in the context here in terms of religious duty. To tactfully and consider in a considered way, incite to good, be a source of encouragement to that which is good, and to negate and decry, I guess, that which is foul. All still within the meaning and the broader meaning, the umbrella of the book of Allah and the Prophet and the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وأن تنطق بحاجة في معيشتك لابد منها, or to speak in some kind of worldly thing which is necessary, some kind of thing which affects your work, what you're doing for a livelihood that's necessary to earn a living. وعن بعض الصحابة رضي الله عنهم أجمعين إن الرجل ليكلمني بكلام لجوابه أشهى إلي من الماء البارد للظمان فأتركه خيفة أن يكون فضولا. So it's narrated that some of the Sahaba said that someone may speak to me. Maybe that someone speaks to me, and for me to answer them my response is going away that is dearer to me or more desirous to me than drinking cold water when you're desperately thirsty. But I leave it out of fear that it may be considered a form of excessive speech. So this is also indicative of a spiritual practice amongst the Sahaba, is that they would be so attentive to their words and what came out of their mouths, that they would typically veer on the side of precaution. That was the hal of the Sahaba. Typically they were quiet. They would veer on the side of precaution out of fear of slipping into just excessive speech. Now, at this point, it's also important to understand that excessive speech is not haram. Typically it's what's called khilaf awla. It goes against the most preferable way of being. So it's part of the adab of the tongue, but it's still considered a defect. ومهم الكلام محصور في كتاب الله. And what's deemed important in the way that we speak, in the way that we communicate, ultimately is encapsulated in the book of Allah. And Allah says, لا خير في كثير من نجواهم. There's no good in that much of their conversation. A lot of their private conversation, no, there's not much good. إلا من أمر بصدقة, except somebody that calls or incites towards charity, or ma'ruf, some kind of a goodness, or إصلاح بين الناس, or rectifying between people. Yeah. And he says, والباعث عليه وعلاجه ما سبق في الآفة الأولى. And the thing that the instigating factor, Imam Ghazali is often very concerned about these things. Okay, we know it's not the best of things to do, but what causes it? What's the fuel behind it? And he says it's the same as the first one. It's the same as the first afa. Which is حرص على معرفة ما لا حاجة إليه. He said it's just being really preoccupied in knowing or involving oneself in that which has there's no real need. That's why people speak excessively. Just to, as we said, just to go on with oneself. Or to kind of just bide one's time in that which has no real benefit. So you could say that one of the part of the diagnosis, if we understand why, if we're excessive in the way that we speak, it's to do with an incomplete realization of the importance of the gift of speech. What speech is really there for. And if we're just wasting it, it's kind of not fulfilling that blessing, not living up to the greatness of that blessing. And we're going to go straight on to al-afat al-thalitha, the third defect. And we can, inshallah, speak about two of these things. As you know, some of these things kind of overlap. Al-kalam fi ma la ya'nik, which was the first, speaking and about that which does not concern you, is also related to excessive speech. But excessive speech can also include just a way of compartmentalizing, categorizing. Sometimes you can have more than one defect. It can be compounded illness. But the first two are kind of related. Also in the fact that they're not haram. The ruling in the sacred law, where a person to do this, there's no sin. However, as Imam al-Ghazali says, that what it can do is it can lead a person to that place. If you accustom yourself and desensitize your capacity to think by just almost an abuse of communication, it's very easy to slip into that which is haram, or at the very least makruh. طيب. So الآفة الثالثة الخوض في الباطل. Once again, to plunge in, to involve oneself, to speak about that which is batil, that which is not real. Batil is the opposite of haqq. Perhaps it could be termed like idle speech, but with a capital I in terms of emphasis, because this is where it very much veers towards that which is impermissible. So one of the first things he says talking inappropriately about members of the opposite sex, or talking about some like drinking party or a nightclub. He doesn't say nightclub, obviously. He says majalis of khamar, majalis of alcohol. But he's talking about when people just talking about these kind of things. And it's funny because this is something which can happen to the nafs. Even if somebody is not that way inclined, the nafs has an inclination towards just talking about sinful things. So you got to catch yourself. وَتَنَعُمِ أَهْلِ التَّرَفِ وَالْمُلْكِ وَمَرَاسِمِهِمْ. And he says, talking about like, talking about the luxurious lifestyles of people in power. Obviously, this time he's talking about like a sovereign, like a king. We have like, what's that thing? Like cribs, just looking through someone's house, and like just wishing that you had that giant screen and that crazy fish tank going through your living room. He gives that as an example of batil. وهو مما لا يحل الخوض فيه. In reality, it's that which, its classification is that which there is no permissibility to speak in. There's an impermissibility. أما الكلام فيما لا يعني أو أكثر مما يعني فهو ترك الأولى ولا تحريم فيه. In regards to the first two, speaking about that which has no meaning, is no concern to you, or speaking too much about even the stuff that is meaningful to you, going on with oneself, فهو ترك الأولى. It's preferable to leave. And it's a classification also in the sacred law. It's not makruh, it's like a stage less than makruh. It's dislike, it's inappropriate. It's related to muru'ah. A person's kind of, it's a very archaic term now, but like one's chivalry, related to futuwa. It's like it doesn't befit a person, a noble person, to be doing those kind of things. وَلَا تَحْرِيمَ فِيهِ. But there's no impermissibility. We have to understand these things. That which we say, that it's all weighed upon the sacred law as well. إِلَّا أَنَّهُ لَا يُؤْمَنُ. And as we mentioned, he says, except that the person is not, is not entirely safe from falling into those things which are impermissible. So there's this concept, as you have in the sacred law, that you have almost like concentric circles, like a defense system, types of like fortification. And if you just, by the way, it's not haram. If you, as you say, skating on thin ice, you're leaving yourself with a very thin protection before it's very easy for it to be penetrated. Someone can just instigate it, you see something, and it's very easy to fall into that which is haram. But if a person fortifies themselves, which is the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that to choose the most beautiful of speech and everything that we say, then there are many layers and degrees of defense before it can even get in there. You'll be able to recognize it before it even gets in there. Similarly, as we know, even in terms of the acts of sunnah, people say it's only sunnah, it's not, I don't have to do it. But they're a protection for the fard. They're a protection. This is the way the deen works. It's not like, well, I can figure it out. Let me just do the bare minimum. Okay, that's fine. And there's no sin in that if we're a person to do that. But the more that we can increase in our practice of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's a healthy protection and ultimately a source of nourishment for that core. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الرجل ليتكلم بكلمة بالكلمة من رضوان الله ما يظن أن تبلغ به ما بلغت. There may be a person, indeed a person speaks one word and it's in the good pleasure of Allah. Allah is pleased with what he said. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally writes him down or records him. He's ordained in the, declared a person that remains in the divine contentment until Yawm al-Qiyamah through one word. Someone says one thing and it catches the eye of Allah. It's pleasing to Allah. It's dear to Allah. And it's a means for a person to remain in that state, from the divine gaze until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And similarly, a person may speak something in sakhatillah, the displeasure of Allah. Really pay no attention, no consideration. And the person is written down in a place of the divine wrath until Yawm al-Qiyamah, waliyadu billah. It's narrated by Imam al-Tirmidhi, وقال حسن صحيح. وابن ماجه وأصله في البخاري. The first part, the actual essence of it is in Sahih Bukhari. سيدنا عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه says أعظم الناس خطايا يوم القيامة أكثرهم خوض في الباطل. The people, the biggest problems on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the biggest mistakes that they've got to deal with and face the accountability of in Yawm al-Qiyamah, are the people that are the most concerned of people with delving into that which is batil, that which is false. You could say idle talk, once again, people of idle talk, but idle in that which is impermissible. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, because the Imam Ghazali says there's an ishara to this in the Quran, this state, the people in Yawm al-Qiyamah, وَكُنُّ نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. We just used to busy ourselves, delve into that which everyone else was, with those that delve into that which was batil, that which had no meaning. And also the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَلَا تَقْعُدُوا مَعْهُمْ. Don't sit with them, don't be in their presence, حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِ. Until they delve into something other than that speech. Hadith, a speech, a conversation, a communication, غَيْرِهِ, other than this, other than that, other than batil. إِنَّكُمْ إِذًا مِثْلُهُمْ. And if you don't, then you're like them. You get counted amongst them. This is also like Imam al-Haddad mentions at the beginning of Adab Suluk al-Murid, his text, the primer text on the etiquettes of spiritual wayfaring, when he says it's the importance of being actively seeking good company, because you'll be raising and ascending spiritually, even if you're not doing anything, but just being in that presence. And being in bad company, you'll be descending spiritually, even if you're not doing anything wrong, except if you have a good intention. If a person goes into that, everyone's going to be these insular people that never venture out into the big wide world. No, if you have a good intention, there's a fortification in this, there's a light in this, because you're going, with the righteous intention. But just to do it, just to sit around, and I just needed the company. That company may be more detrimental than you may think. Now, if we look at the nature of most of what we are involved in, what we do, there's a huge part of it which enters into this. خوض في الباطل. It's actually actively engaging as a cultural practice in something which is haram. We may not even know it. So much of the content on through social media veers towards this. It's boasting about those things which have no meaning to Allah. It's, going into those things which, people's lives, spying. Just this, you can see very easily, it's an amazing the way, the tapestry in which Imam al-Ghazali has woven these chapters together. Because you can see how it's a slippery slope. Firstly, he's just saying, look, if a person just doesn't recognize the gift of communication and they're just speaking about that which has no meaning to them, then very quickly, and even those things which, it's important, but not that important to be going on and on. And it's very easy. And the person feels it in themselves, you recognize it. When do you know that? How can you know? Okay, maybe you're in a particularly good state. Somebody's just had a very, a special moment with Allah. I don't know. They've read the Quran. They've met somebody that inspired them. Something they feel their heart is, when their heart's sensitive. Watch from that point how things can, if it's not tended to, slowly spiral down. And sometimes what can happen is it's kind of like, I just need to chill out. That was a bit intense. Now I just need to take my rest time. Let me go for the entertainment. And that's what our societies do. I just want to entertain you. What's wrong with a bit of entertainment? Nothing, no harm in entertainment. Entertainment isn't haram. It's not. But when that becomes your deen, your way of being, those that take their deen, la'iban wa lahu. Allah says they take their deen as play and lahu. Which lahu is like idle talk, meaningless speech. Look how powerful the sports industry is. It's like a deen. At least you've got football in the UK. It's like a deen for people. And even many of the motifs of religion, if anyone's ever been to a football match and you go out into the stadium, the roar of people, there's something almost ethereal and I would not sacred, but kind of majestic. Normally, those feelings and those circumstances for human beings, that we have those in order to orientate towards the sacred, but we've done it for play, and the hype and the people following people with you got a certain haircut, for example. Like there are things going on behind these things. They're not neutral. Walahu, like empty. Lahu is like empty speech. Cinema, the movie industry. How big is it? Huge. It's also like a deen. I love that. I grew up on that movie. I can quote it line for line. And it sounds quaint and nice, but if you look at for example, the people in Talim, they grew up learning, or did they grow up learning and memorizing and absorbing? And it's not really that fun. You can memorize the entire script of a movie that doesn't really have any real meaning to anything. And we can't memorize a single surah, or we find it difficult to memorize. We've got to be careful what we let into the heart, because this is what Imam Ghazali is talking about. It's what it leads to. It leads to the heart, and it's indicative of the heart. So always, we should try and think about what's coming from the heart. Use the tongue. Okay, I just said something there that's indicative of something that's going on inside of me. Place all of these things on that balance. not that big a deal about speaking about those things which are meaningless. Okay, it's not haram. But do I want to have a heart which is meaningless and accustomed and conditioned upon meaninglessness? Okay, it's just a bit of extra talk. Nobody ever died. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, I'm a bit of a, I do go on with myself a bit sometimes, but it's not that big a deal. I don't really need to redress it. All these things are subtle excuses for the nafs. It's the nafs saying, I can't really deal with that now. It's like, but do you want to be a person that's just excessive in that which is meaningless? Like that's what your heart is to Allah. That's what Allah is looking to your heart. And then the third, if the tongue, what you communicate, has a large portion of that which is it's not deemed right by Allah. Allah does not like it. And it has an implication. Those words have implications to your akhirah. And that batil is a movement away from haqq, from what's real. Do you want to have that state cultivated in your heart? This is why these things are so important. It's not just what you say, it's just a few words. These things have implications and are indications to our inward states. At very least, what can happen is a person becomes desensitized. Desensitized to haqq. And if you look at even within, typically you'll find it within cinema, that the whole theatre of it is constructed to elicit emotions which are actually sacred within you. You have something very precious within you that needs to be taken care of. You have people, watching a movie, crying over two people. They're actors. It was scripted. It's not real. And people, their emotions are almost. There's something for traditional peoples they'd find this very disturbing. And people, it's just such a sad movie. That's not normal. They'd almost compare it to almost like a spell. That's the way they would view it. That you're allowing yourself to be bewitched by this very strange thing. You're letting things into your heart, which is not healthy. Cultivate your heart and those sacred emotions. Your heart was made to be gentle and feel those things in order to for something which was high and great and meaningful. Subhanallah. And now we've got social media. If only the TV was bad enough, the kind of comment culture. And now, subhanallah, you have these very strange, almost like kind of virtual ghettos on the internet where like-minded people, typically they'd just be spread out in a society and they weren't able to kind of get together. And sometimes it's very, very dark thoughts and intentions, and they have these kind of sub-communities now lingering within cyberspace. So if you're going to go into that ocean, you have to know how to protect yourself. Because the same things apply as well. Just because it's digitized doesn't make it doesn't give it a different hukam. How much time on social media am I speaking about, commenting on, liking that which actually has no meaning to me? How much am I spending just excess time in communicating? Because it's an extension of the tongue. Okay, now it's most likely on our fingertips. Or how much time am I just now many people have, if we look at the ba'ath, the kind of the impetus, the factor which causes these things is just to kind of almost like to get involved, to be known, or to learn meaningless stuff. There are people, and it's almost been like institutionalized. People have crafted the ability to, we can do this with these people. Like they've got this thing called dopamine. That if we kind of really tap into it, we can keep them scanning through stuff all day long. And they know it's not not good for them, but they can't even, so addicted, the power of addiction. It's a real abuse of the soul. We need to, as Muslims, we really need to hold on to this precious gift, because if we don't, we'll be abused by the enemies that can be seen and the enemies that can't. Because the nafs inclines towards addiction. It wants to. That's the pulse of the nafs. It's constantly flowing. It's in some ways, you could describe that as related to hawa. Your hawa is like an addiction. It's the same impulse, that need. I need to see. I need to drink that coffee. I need to say that word. And what Islam is doing is empowering you to say you don't, and you have the power. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you if you orientate that intention. One of the shuyukh said, if a person really works on these things, because that's the thing, we know it now. Okay, there are 3 things which we can try and implement, given those balances which Imam Ghazali has given to us. He said, if you work on yourself with these things, then as human beings, our vocalized tongue, our language, is not the only language we've been given. It's not the only communication that we have access to. But if a person channels this to that which is good and pleasing to Allah, then what starts to take place is they become almost invited to a deeper language, which is the language of the heart. The heart has a language, and often we can use it and we don't know we're speaking it, because we think that, no, they can just hear what I'm speaking and that's it. But there's a language of the heart, and if you have adab with that language, then it goes deeper into the language of the soul, and it goes deeper into the language of the sir. The sir is the place where wahi, revelation, was given to the anbiya, to the prophets, to the rusul, and ilham, or divine inspiration, was given to the people of Allah, to the awliya. So this is also, they're not just thinking, it'd just be nice to speak a bit better. They're protecting these gifts. I don't want to be tuned out from that. I want some of that. Who doesn't? I want to know something more about, make me more in tune with my own self and everyone around me, and have some of that communication. That's why they're really attentive to those things. So if you have adab with the tongue, as Imam Ghazali is talking about, then you get taught the language of the heart. If you have adab with the language of the heart, you get taught the language of the ruh. If you have adab with the language of the ruh, you get taught the language of the sir. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And to this meaning, they say, kalam al-arifin as-sukut. The speech of the arifin, of the knowers of God, is silence, meaning silence of the tongue. They don't need to speak that much now to communicate. Their communication is far deeper. So may Allah connect us to them. And in connecting to them, we start to realize the importance of these teachings. As they say, this is a door which is only open from the inside. And spending time in their presence, spending time in their company is one of the greatest ways to get that motivation to do those things. So it's not just a series of lists of do's and don'ts. You just can't speak like that. You've got to have a bit less fun in life. No, they're having the best fun, but it's real fun. So may Allah connect us to them, in their presence and in their perceived absence. And may Allah allow us and give us the courage to take on these things and to know that these are teachings from the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't teach us anything except that it was of absolute, individual importance to every single one of us. And not only to you, but to your families and to your communities and to the broader society. Just being that person that works upon themselves. Inshallah, within this blessed month, turning to Allah, that Allah, if people find these things difficult, turn to Allah, put it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't be afraid of change. As we said, typically people can be afraid of change. Even if you know that which you're accustomed to and familiar with, you know it's not good for you. In this life or the next. It's not like the akhirah seems some faraway thing. No, you know it's not that good for you even now. It's not making that much fun for you even now. Not having that good time with yourself even now. And that's why the rijal, the men of God, they're not all males. Rujula is a maqam, it's a station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's those people that stand up and take on that duty, that calling. So may Allah connect us to those people and make us of them, inshallah, fi khairin wa lutfin wa afiyah. Imagine if we came out of this Ramadan and we were able to put these things into practice. If we root these things within the months of Ramadan, it would become niyat Ramadaniyah, from the Ramadan intentions. That would have an effect in the next year and the next. If a person also starts to really speak and be attentive to what they're speaking about, it's almost immediately they'll start to feel a light in their heart. Almost immediately. Because what you're doing is you're defining your climate, you're defining your environment, you're going into life with prophetic, sacred principles. And the shuyukh would say, if you ever feel a sudden plummet in your state, just feel, sometimes you just feel a bit rough. Like I was fine, and then all of a sudden, what happened there? Like a balloon, all of the air goes out, and he's just, what happened? He says, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّكَ قَدْ تَكَلَّمْتَ فِي مَا لَا يَعْنِيكَ. Know that you've just spoken about that which is of no meaning to you. So that the nature of meaninglessness is it can't cradle the light, it can't cradle nur. We want to be people of light, inshallah. It's much more fun. May Allah connect us to them, inshallah. بخير ونطف وعافية. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين.